Hey guys, welcome to the Good Podcast. I am your host, Rob Watson, and I've got a really interesting and exciting guest lined up for you today. Her name is Linzy Boden. We had a fascinating conversation. It was also really nice to be able to do it. We did it face to face in my home, something that I haven't done that much since COVID. So that was really nice to be able to do that. Linzy is basically, she's an integrated therapist. She's a trainer and speaker, and she's basically got a real desire to help others find their true potential. So what better at doing good than that? We talk into some really interesting subjects. We get an understanding their own personal journey to becoming a counsellor and helping people. We also delve into young people and the challenges that they face and what the hangover effect we got from COVID with the real mental health challenges that people are facing. We also look into the likes of psychedelics and the potential for healings and that. And we also just have a really interesting conversation. Well, I found it particularly interesting anyway. I always find it a pleasure to be able to sit with these interesting people, these knowledgeable people who are full of expertise and wisdom, and for me to be able to sit and explore with them and go on a bit of a journey. And it feels really good to be able to share these conversations with you. So let's get into today's podcast with Linzy. Firstly, Linzy, thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting down with me today in my home. It's been a while since I've done an interview in my lounge area. So
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we were. Well, it's almost pretty much 3 years to the day as we're recording this, when I think someone even said on something this morning that this was like the last day 3 years ago before everything changed, because before COVID hit and everything like that. So what do you, before we get into sort of, you know, the impacts of COVID on people's mental health and stuff, if you could just give people a little bit of an overview of kind of yourself and your company Stand Tall and what it is that you do, that'd be great.
Okay. So Linzy Boden, I've been a therapist for roughly about 25 years now. I always feel really old when I say that. And Stand Tall is basically the brand name that defines everything that I do, really. So I work as a therapist, I work as a clinical supervisor for other therapists, but I run a small training organisation that predominantly teaches people to be counsellors, but it also has other kind of branches off that as well. So we run small training courses for people to just gain self-awareness, find out about themselves, CPD courses for professionals, and that kind of thing. But it came about quite unusually, the teaching side of things, because I worked as a therapist for many years and kind of fell into teaching because I worked in a rehab, and the guy there wanted me to run some workshops. And back then, as an enthusiastic, new person in the world of counselling, I just said yes, of course I can do that. I'd never taught in my life, I'd never run a workshop, I'd never written anything down, but I just kind of said yeah. And so fell into putting together workshops to help people through addiction, and that kind of woke up the love of giving the knowledge and the information that I feel helped me to a group of people rather than just a one-to-one person. So Stand Tall now predominantly teaches counsellors, and it came about because I got sick to death of mainstream education and the churning out of sausages, rather than like really training people and really opening people's minds and helping people understand what therapy is all about, rather than just answer these questions, write this essay, tick these boxes, congratulations, now you're a therapist, which is what I did in colleges and unis for years. And it was quite soul destroying. So Stand Tall came about because a group of students that I was teaching wanted me to do something on my own, because they too were disillusioned with how they were being taught, and they actually persuaded me to set up a training centre on my own, which I thought that was an absolutely insane idea. Just don't be stupid, of course I can't do that. But they pestered me. So I agreed to do that. I agreed to affiliate myself with an awarding body just to get them through their diploma, because they literally wouldn't leave me alone. And it was only meant to be for them. And 8 or 9 years later, it's still here. And I'm really proud of it, because it's I feel like I've stayed true to what I wanted it to be, which was people that are disheartened with how education is and how, even when we take that back to schools, we're not educating people, we're teaching people how to pass exams. And I feel like we've stuck with that at Stand Tall. You really feel yourself getting pulled apart and put back together again. And yeah, so 8 or 9 years later, it's still going strong.
Yeah, sounds good. And I've got a little bit of second-hand experience because my wife Ruth went through. That's how I come to know yourself. Yeah. And she went on your training program and did about through the journey of 2-3 years. Went through the program as in our trained counsellors out in the world doing her thing. So I can see that. I can see that, and I can personally see the transformation that an individual goes through doing that training as well, and actually the effect that it can have on the household as well. It can stir lots of stuff up as the person is going on their own transformational journey. Things will be swirling up. But it's definitely for the. It's definitely for the greater good, and to be able to do something that you feel like you're helping others. Like this podcast is all about doing good in whatever way we can do it, whether it's you're going out picking up a little bit of litter or if you're doing something on a grand scale. But I think we're living in a time now when counsellors and therapists are needed more than ever. Yeah. We just say we're out of we are generally. It's been 3 years since COVID all kicked off, and you think about the impact that it's had on society. But I think anyway, it was just everything was bubbling anyway. Things have been for decades and decades. People have just been feeling stretched. There's a really good quote actually on your site. I think it was about being a counsellor, but you say something to be a passenger alongside someone on the journey of self-discovery is like the greatest honour. Absolutely.
And I think that stretches into the teaching side of things, because that journey that you sit in with your client and experience with them, it's just so beautiful, and that's what they go through. And I think as a trainee counsellor, you've got to go through that as well, because that's what you're going to sit with your clients. That's certainly what I went through. I certainly went through kind of stripping myself back and building myself back up again. So I think it's important to go through that when you train. But it is definitely the best job in the world, and it's the most honourable thing to do, to sit and experience. I feel like the most intimate relationships I've ever had with any humans have been with clients, because you go past all of those barriers that we put up for family and friends and loved ones and colleagues, and you just experience a client letting so many of those barriers down, and you see you experience their true selves. It's such a privilege.
And to do something as well where you're constantly transforming and growing through the practice of doing that it's a gift really to have that as a career, but also to be getting so much reward from it yourself is. Yeah,
it is. I mean, Carl Rogers was quoted apparently in about his 80s. And he was asked what it feels like to have reached self-actualization, and he says, I'll tell you when I get there. I'm paraphrasing him obviously, but I'll tell you when I get there. And I remember seeing that as a student myself, and just thinking that was amazing, that this guy that we all put so much, kind of held in such high esteem, was still on his journey.
So do you think it has been, I think it's like it is your calling, it feels like 100%. And so what kind of, I noticed that you you used to be, was it a photographer back in the day, and then through maternity leave, that was a bit of an opportunity, trigger point to go down a different path.
It was, but also I went through my own dark difficulties around that time as well. So I was in a really difficult relationship. I was pregnant. I had this job that was taking me all around the country as a photographer, and but which I enjoyed, but it was becoming quite soulless. There was nothing in it. It was nice to work with the people that I worked with, the clients that I worked with, but it was a bit soulless. So I went through a bit of a dark time myself, difficult relationship, having a baby, and having children just completely turns your world totally upside down, especially when you're not planning to have a baby, which is what it was like for me. So going on maternity gave me an opportunity to reflect. It gave me an opportunity to think, what is it that I actually want to do? And then I entered therapy myself, and that was the beginning of it. That was kind of almost like, okay, this is the world that I kind of belong in. You know, I spent a long time never really feeling completely like I fitted in the world. I existed in the world, but I didn't really fit in the world. Not like I feel like I fit. And so going into therapy just opened up a whole other dimension to me to what life could be like. You know, the having people that thought like me, you know, growing up in a kind of a big family, you know, she's a bit weird, all these like kind of hippy dippy ideas that she has, and you know, she's kind of what she's thinking about now. You're such a big thinker, you're so overthinky. But so going into counselling myself definitely gave me a doorway into something else. And then during maternity, I thought, I'll just go and have a little try. And I went to a small local community college and did an introduction to counselling. And that was it. I was sold. I was completely sold. It just felt like a light went on inside my head, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you find something as well, it's like you find that passion and and purpose in something, the drive, like the energy that you're no longer having to drag yourself to stuff. You're literally getting pushed because you're just on the momentum.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And you know, you mentioned Ruth before, and the transitions and the changes that like my students can kind of go through. And it's a disclaimer at the beginning of any course, you know, just beware. If you don't feel like you've been ripped apart and tipped upside down, then you've not done it properly. And we apologise to the families at the end at the graduation. I'm so sorry. But yeah, it is. It just felt like that was it then. You know, that was the road that I was going down. I was kind of quite lost, even though I had a decent job. I was really quite lost. I just didn't feel like, I thought, is this it? I'm 27, really? And it was, yeah, I just kept feeling pulled towards it, and more and more and more. You know, and people would say, you're really changing, and I was like, thank God. Yay, I'm changing. But yeah, it was difficult for some people to accept that change, and difficult for me to transition through it as well, because of course you go through different layers of it. You know, I was angry for a while, and I was kind of, you know, sat on soapboxes for a while, you know, and kind of and then eventually you settle down to yourself. So just feel a little bit like all the pieces get thrown up in the air, and then they come back down, and then, you know, you piece it all back together again, but it's just a very different picture this time.
Yeah. And you've got to be brave as well. And it sounds like you've been very brave at those phases, because often it can be easy just to stay with what we know, because it was comfortable or we had an income, and then suddenly you've got a young child, and then you're like, oh no, I'm going to go down this other path. Yeah. And there'll be times of, like, you know, sacrifice and hardship because you have that calling and you know something inside of you. I often say that to people, because I think it's something like 70% of people really dislike the jobs, and that's a huge number. That's tens of millions of people in this country that are just going to something just because they feel like they have to. And you feel like that affects on your mental health, your physical health, everything, just to be doing something, and particularly your relationships. If you're going out doing something you dislike and then you're coming home, it's like, sometimes who do you take it out on?
Absolutely.
Does it go on your family? Does it go on your friends? So to be brave enough to find something like that, it's tricky for some people to find it, isn't it? It's like to know what they do. I know the thing that kind of got me out of a pickle of being young was being creative. Yeah. Like a lot of my friends, like we did it all. We went off the rails, 18, 19, you know, taking all sorts of drugs and whatnot. And unfortunately, some of them didn't come back from that. And then it just became, that's what the life was. It was just to get any kind of work, just to cover. They weren't, you know, major addicts, but they were functioning in society to make sense. But they would live for the weekends. There was no real purpose, no drive. But for me, it's like, okay, I had art, and that's the thing that pulled me out of it. Yeah. And I suppose it's like, but I think in all of us, I think every one of us has got something to give, has got a gift in some way, and it's just us trying to find it.
I agree, you know, and as I say, I mentioned Rogers before. He talks about us having, you know, trying to help a client to locate their true potential. And I think these were some of the things that I was learning when I was first studying, that was just speaking to me, because these were thoughts that I'd always had. but just thought I was a bit mad because nobody else thought like that. No one else. I was like, I've got this true other person inside of me, and people just look at you like, well, are you still tripping from the weekend? But it's like, I think you're absolutely right, and people have got a different version of themselves on the inside. It doesn't mean that the version of themselves that they are is the wrong version, but the version of ourselves on the outside is predominantly kind of moulded like clay, isn't it? It's like moulded by where you are in the family, the experiences that you have growing up, the friends that you have, the schools that you go to, the achieve, all of those things have an impact. And so many people, you find that do it, just end up on that treadmill and find themselves really freaking unhappy and not really understanding why, maybe thinking it's because I'm in the wrong relationship, it's because this, it's because this is boring, or because of that, or because of my job, and it's stripping things back sometimes to just kind of find out what is it that's going on the inside. And I think we are very, very fortunate if we find something to pile that energy into. Like yourself, I had many friends that went down a drink and drugs path rather than going down a path of finding something that gave them some purpose. And I think sometimes the drugs and alcohol in young people, that it gives the purpose. It allows you to step out of that self that is dissatisfied, and kind of forever chasing that constant high, or that constant like different feeling. Unfortunately, it's the case for a lot of young people back in my generation, your generation, and today's, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And today's, I think, you look like we've got a real health crisis going on with children now. Mental health crisis is huge. You could say social media plays a role. I'm sure it does, but maybe it's just like spark something a bit more to like amplify it. What do you think is it too big a question to say? What's sort of the root cause of what's
happening with our kids?
Yeah,
it is a massive question, isn't it? I don't think there is a root cause. I think there are roots. Like any plant, there is not just one root. There's lots, and I think social media does play a part in it. But I also think like the structure of family has really changed over the years. The structure of how young people get their enjoyment. To be able to type onto a keyboard of a computer and find stuff out. So there's some real benefits for our younger generation, that they've just got like the world at their fingertips to find out as much information as they want. But then also a kind of either a reclusive aspect to that, so like staying quite reclusive and kind of pulled back from mixing socially with people, or to the opposite, where young people are so pressured. I think school has a big thing to do with it. It's taking me back to education again, mainstream education, that I could do an entire podcast on. How we are trained to pass an exam. We are not trained to think. We're not taught to think. Teachers are under immense pressure, massive classrooms, high pressure. We have work. Some of the teachers that I support, the hours that they do is ridiculous. They're on about £3 an hour when you take into account all the extra hours that they do. So you've got teachers in education who are really, really stressed and really resentful and frustrated. And then you've got kids that are disillusioned, and they can find out what they want when they type it into a computer. I'm not going to listen to Mr. Boring at the front of the class. And then you've got home lives where, families are really stressed, trying to manage a household with what used to be able to be one income would come in, and and that would be managed, and it's not. It's two incomes. It's not even making the cut these days. So you've got stress and anxiety and pressure from all areas. And then you've got the whole idea of, the competitiveness and the like community. If I don't get a like, I'm not liked. If I don't get validation from the outside, then I'm not good enough. And you've got, I think, a lot of young people being real prisoners to people's opinions, and then that really then enhances that need for external gratification, external likes or external validation, or people, if I do this, then I'm better, or if I do this, then I'm accepted, or I do this, then I'm okay. Not enough space for people to just be able to be individuals. And then the pressure that schools put on young people, that at 16 you need to know what you're going to do with the rest of your life. You know, I'm sitting here now thinking, I'm 53 and I'm still exploring what I want to do with my life. I didn't have a clue when I was 15. I wanted to be a lighting engineer when I was 15. You know, I was like, I want to go and work behind the stage and put the lights on performances, and that never happened because, you know, back then I was a girl, you weren't allowed to do stuff like that. But I don't think there's one route. I think there's lots of pressures and lots of pressures, and then it's become very, very normalised almost, you know, and almost as if young people feel like they're not interested enough if there's not something going on, if they don't fit in a particular category. They're not interested enough or not accepted enough or not normal enough. I've heard lots of young people in the places that I work talk about happy pills, and they talk about antidepressants. I need to go and get my happy pills. And so we've got, you know, I don't remember ever a child at 16 being put on antidepressants when I was a kid. It's horrifying to think that, you know, so at the age of 16 you take a pill and that makes you better. You know, we're like in the world of Alice in Wonderland, aren't we? You know, take this pill, it will make you feel better. Yeah. And then what? Then nothing on the top of it. Yeah. Nothing to help that person discover who they are, not encouraging a child through education to question, to ask questions, to explore, to be inquisitive. Just fill that box in there and that will get you your GCSE, because your GCSEs are really, really important. It's the most important thing in the world. You know, I remember watching a wonderful Jay Shetty video where he walks into an assembly and the head teacher's like giving their speech about, this is the most important decision you'll ever make at 16 because you're doing your GCSEs, and he walks in and he goes, no, it's not. It's really, really not. Not even close. You know, it's not even close. And interestingly, from a therapist perspective, I'm watching the faces of the young people that all look like they were virtually asleep when the poor head teacher was given. And you know, the head teacher's got a puppet above, you know, a puppeteer above her and a puppeteer above them, and so we're all kind of you know, doing what we think is the right thing. But watching the faces on the young people when he started to speak and they all woke up, you know, they all kind of, you could see their body language of them kind of sitting upright and kind of leaning forwards in their seats, and some kids were nodding and, you know, and elbowing one another, and all of a sudden you've got these young people that are awake because they're being told something different. But then I could get even deeper, Rob, and I could just say that there's a sinister plan to keep people from being educated. We don't want our young people thinking. That would be bizarre, to let young people think, because then you'd just have a revolution.
I know, and then there'd be change.
And there's like, you know, the powers that be don't want that.
No, I fit in that camp as well, of feeling like that. It doesn't make sense the way things are. You know, you look at all the destruction around the world, the wars, the poverty, everything. It's not just an accident. A lot of it's just happened from design over, you know,
absolutely,
over the past so many centuries, and, you know, power and greed at the root cause of it, and all sorts of stuff. And yeah, I'd like to think we're going to go through a huge paradigm shift, and it feels like we are, and maybe that's why it feels like so many things are at the breaking point, because they have to fall to pieces, absolutely, don't they? And then I think you were saying before, like in your life or when you're going on a council and you're doing the training, like things fall apart. I think Marilyn Monroe's got a great quote. It's something along the lines of that, like, you know, about your life falling to pieces. I'm actually going to butcher it now, so I won't even. I'll dig it out from somewhere and I'll put it in the show notes.
I vaguely remember that one.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think we do. You know, maybe we've got an opportunity now in society to rewrite stuff, to get back to our roots, to remember, to use the best that we've got available now, but to remember what it meant. You mentioned about family. You know, you've got single parent families, you've got even both parents, but they're so stretched, so working, like, where's the grandparents, where's the big households? If you look at, say, Italy and Greece, which probably still has that to some regard, you know, the grandparents are living there, they're all together, particularly in India you'll have it, there might be 20, 30 people all living very close by. You see the benefits that has on young people, on everyone in life and in the household.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure. If you push something down too much, it's eventually going to pop back up. You know, eventually it's going to explode out. If you put a lid on a pressure cooker and just leave the lid on, it's going to explode. And so, hopefully you're right that we've got this movement towards change. It would be amazing. But then again, I just think there's a lot of pressures. There's a lot of young people who are quite angry, and when you suppress anger, it can become anxiety and stress. So you've got a lot of young people that are either displaying this pressure through heightened aggression. I mean, look at the violence and the aggression that we've got going on with our young people at the moment. It's terrifying. So you've got a lot of these people that are just pressed down, and that's either coming out through anger. And for those that aren't, rebelling in that way or displaying those emotions in that way, they're becoming really, really anxious. With great power comes great responsibility, and having a lot of knowledge can actually make young people quite anxious. If I don't know what I want to do by the time I'm 16, does that mean I'm broken? My life is over. And you've got all these young minds being drip fed this information that if you don't know what you want to do by the time you're 15, 16, forget it, game over. And you and I both know, because we've crossed that finish line, we're like, well, that's a load of crap, really. Yeah. But they don't know that, and then they've got pressure from their parents as well, and pressure from other people that do know. And so, you've got a lot of that pressure happening and pushing down on. But I also think on the greater scheme, our powers that be, I use powers almost like it's in inverted commas, our powers that be are quite happy to keep that melting pot of anger and frustration going, and don't think outside the box, don't use your own minds, and we'll filter through a lot of anger and hatred as well. If you think about what's happening in the wider circle of the world, we've never been so full of hate in a long time, hate for other people, and that's being filtered through by the most, allegedly the most influential people. Our governments and our influential people are kind of pushing that idea that it's okay to hate and be angry and blame, and it's their fault, or it's this fault, or it's that, and it's just this huge. I used to love Monty Python as a kid, but one of the opening scenes was just this like great big boot coming down at the front, just crushing everything underneath. And that's kind of what it feels like. It just feels like there's this great big boot pressing down on everyone.
It's divide and rule.
Divide and conquer, absolutely.
Yeah.
The oldest trick in the book.
I think people think now, those things won't happen. They happened in the past.
Yeah, because we're nicely coveted with our warm houses and we can all afford a car and a telly, and we can all afford things, and we can afford the occasional holiday. So we don't think it's that bad. We're kind of wrapped up in this bubble, like it's all okay. It's not going to be as bad as that. It's not going to be that bad. And it's only when you open your mind and you have the people that are open thinkers that actually see, no, actually it is that bad, and we are repeating history, and we are, we've not learnt. We spoke earlier on, didn't we, about how evolved as a nation we are, but how Neanderthal almost we are as well in some ways. We've all got, like you say, computers and nice homes and things like that, but the way that we're thinking, it's almost like we've never had a history lesson. None of us have ever seen anything that's gone before, and it feels like that kind of thing might be happening again, particularly. So we've got young people who are really pressured, but then we've also got an uprising of young people that I've experienced that are quite open thinkers, that are using their minds and questioning things. And so hopefully there will be some kind of uprising. Let's break it all apart and put it back together again. Yeah,
it feels like that. I don't think nothing's going to be a quick fix, because it's so so complex. It's so big. There's so much. But I think it could take generation or two for before we actually. Or maybe
we probably won't see it.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully my daughter will be.
Yeah.
It's interesting me becoming a father, making me realise how. I wanted to just do my own part in some way to leave the world in a better place. Even, I think often we think about the problems are so big. People think about the environment or, all these things that are going on, and then you think, well, what can little old me do? When actually I believe that again ties into how the powers that be want us to feel. They want us to feel powerless. They want us to feel like we can't make any change or have any agency in our life. Yeah. They want to keep us maybe in that victim mentality as well as me, when actually I believe through my own journey of self-discovery and the changes I've made in life, and I see through many other people, we can make such huge change. And it starts with us, it starts with our families, and it starts out there.
It does.
And so I do have hope then. I do think there's, as you say, an uprising, and that uprising will come from that. But then if we can group together in some way and create initiatives and do things and almost do, for me, is trying to have one foot in the system and one foot out of it. So to the point where I can, I'm not feeling like I'm fully dependent on everything. You know, it's like, what can I do? And it almost feels like, I heard someone saying, it's actually we need to create new systems that make the old systems obsolete.
Yeah.
So the old obsolescence could literally be the government, could literally be the way the banking system is, the way the educational system is, to create alternative versions of that, which then naturally people would suddenly see they work. They're working much better. There's more harmony. But yeah, it's not gonna happen. But I see like pockets of like communities popping up and stuff like that, and them I really feel quite empowered by them and seeing, oh right, look at the way they're homeschooling the kids, or the way they've all grown their own food and what they do all these things and got to set up their own businesses and stuff. Absolutely. And they suddenly feel they're not behest to like, oh, someone saying you're redundant or this is going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. It's a really good point, having one foot in society and one foot out, and it's just having that. It's kind of being aware, isn't it? Being aware that you're in a system. Of course you're in a system. Of course you have to be part of that system, because that's just how life works at the moment. And of course you've got to be part of it, but you don't have to be completely led by it. You know, you can free think as well. You can step outside as well. You can do different things. And I do think our young people are so important, you know, so important to influence, because they're going to be the people that carry this message forward. They're going to be, you know, your little one and you know, my kids, they're going to be the ones that are going to move forward with this. But you're absolutely right. It does give some hope, doesn't it, that we're not all doomed. Yeah.
I think when you turn on the news, that's right. I talk about this in the podcast.
I don't watch news.
Well, that's we don't. No. You know, every time we have the radio on, and every time it says, "Oh, the news," and we go, "Alexa, off." And I think Stella's starting to say that as well now, so she's aware that she won't be listening to the news as well. No. I think it's Jordan Peterson says something like he stopped listening to the news years and years ago, because anything you listen to, often in 30 days time, it's not news anymore. Yeah. So it's constantly that cycle of a place of fear. Yeah. And if we could look at it bigger picture, when you're in a place of fear, people can be manipulated and pushed down a path because of stuff. But the reason why I did this podcast and I speak to people who are making a difference in the world is because there is so much good happening. Yeah. As soon as you scratch underneath the surface, you can see there's so much good things happening and change. And it tends to be happening on them small local levels. Yeah. And then when you see it, you can get part of that. And then you feel as if you're making a difference. Yeah. But I do believe we're just going through a phase now where things feel, I don't know how long that phase is, very intense, very unsettling. So much stuff's coming up to the surface. But it'll be an opportunity for us to... Well, that's also when the most growth comes in your life.
Oh, God, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, as a society, you know, maybe we do all need to break apart to put the right pieces back together, or put them back in a different order, you know. But yeah, you're completely right. There is so much good in the world. I haven't watched the news for years and years and years because it was just so depressing. It just used, you know, I'd come home from work when I was part of that, you know, dog eat dog system, and I'd come home and I'd had a crappy day, and then I put the news on and it's depressing. I just think, oh, this is just really depressing me. Why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? So I didn't watch it for years. Plus, I'm just being lied to. That's the way I see the news. I'm just being lied to. You tell me what you want me to know, and yeah, 30 days later it's all gone away again. You're absolutely right. Fear is the ultimate emotion to instill into humans in order to control them. But recognising our own power through fear is really, really important as well. You know, so as an individual, if you're afraid, you've also got power. You know, because fear is your body's way of telling you something isn't right here, something's not okay. It's an indicator. So it's about listening to your own internal indicator, not the indicators of something on the outside world, and recognising what you're powerful over and what you have no power over whatsoever. You have no power over, you know, changing what's going on in Russia, for example. You've got no power over that, you as an individual, absolutely none. So you either spend the energy worrying about the potential of what could happen in those situations, or you take that energy somewhere else and you spend it on yourself, on your family, on what can I do? How can I stop myself feeling so frightened? How can I address what's going on inside my nervous system? How can I fix that? Turning the power inward and recognising that you've got the power to change only you. It's the only person in the world that you can change is yourself. But if enough of those people that know that they've got power inside to change themselves can come together, then that ripple effect can be so influential. You know, we are the most powerful creatures on the planet. That's why we're top of the food chain. We've just forgotten. I think we've forgotten how freaking powerful we are.
We have.
You know, how to change ourselves, how to move in a different direction, to make another decision, to lean over and switch the TV off, to tell Alexa, change channels, to just choose not to have that stuff filtered into your brain that's just going to cause you to be overwhelmingly anxious about something you have absolutely no power over.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like you say, it's a switch.
Yeah,
it's literally directing your attention from one thing to something else.
Absolutely.
I heard a good analogy about television. So television is like tells lies to your vision. And you think about, you know, the amount of stuff that you'll get, and you think because someone sits at a nice desk and they've got the BBC logo next to them and they look well presented and whatnot, you think, oh, I trust that person.
Of course, yeah.
But a lot of the information's come through, and I think, you know, look at the past few years, and even going beyond that, I think of the information, like none of it was empowering. None of the past few years was like, you know what? You could be doing all these empowering things to your health. It felt for me, it was all the opposite.
Absolutely.
It was all the opposite.
You've only got to look at, we've said it's 3 years to the day, the kind of the world just turned on its head. And it was quite surreal for me watching it, because I've always been an observer of things and people. So watching how many people would, you know, it's almost like this image of that people would like crawl into their front rooms at 6 o'clock and watch the news, and you know, the panel of people that were just telling us what was happening, and then they'd all crawl away back into the house and be all really scared about it, and we'd all go outside on the step on a particular day and bang pans together and go yay, you know, and we were just absolutely led by a nose ring to do these things, and just watching it from the outside, just thinking, wow. Okay, you know, that's quite scary to think how easy it is. But then it's not scary at all, because then if you go back in your history books, if you remember your history lessons, it's happened like forever. But knowing how easily we can be controlled by others gives you power, because if someone else can do that to me, what can I do to me? How can I change me? How can I step up? And it doesn't matter that other people might think you're weird or strange or it's not the same. It's what you do on the inside first. You can't heal other people or save anyone else. You can only do that for yourself. And then the hope is that then filters out of you. As humans, we're so influenced by the people around us. You know, our young people, if they get in, how many times we say young people, they got with the wrong crowd, because humans are influenced. But it's just if you place yourself in an environment that influences you in a different way, then that evolution will be slightly different for you. Your change will be different. So you can do that for yourself. And you know, then I do think that like-minded people are drawn to like-minded people. And the hope is that kind of silent change will take place under the surface. But just starting with you, for me, you know, it's just starting with yourself, learning what power you've got to turn the telly off, learning what power you've got to change the radio, learning what power you've got to not listen to that toxic conversation, to not get involved in that toxic conversation, kind of allow people to have their own opinions, and move away. Carl Rogers, again, I talk a lot about good old Carl, but he talks about the environment that we need to create for therapeutic change to take place, and he has 3 conditions: unconditional positive regard, congruence and empathy. Unconditional positive regard is just accepting people. Everyone's different. People are going to have different opinions. Accept them. It's fine. It's okay. You can have your opinion. I can have mine.
God, that'd be good in society right now.
Wouldn't it be wonderful? And this is what I mean. These conditions are just, it would just be wonderful. Wouldn't imagine a world where this is what we teach kids. Unconditional positive regard. Congruence, which is being honest and genuine with yourself as well as others. And empathy. What's it like to be you? What's it like to stand in your shoes and to try and feel what that's like? And they are the three conditions. It's the soil, it's the light, and it's the water for a plant. It's the same thing. It's, it connects to the universe in that way. But what a world, can you imagine it? If that's what we're teaching kids.
In a decade.
Imagine
everything would be transformed.
It would just be transformed. Just acceptance of people, not trying to change other people to be the same as you. What a boring world that would be.
Like, when you say that for me should be part of the curriculum of every school in the country, rather than, here you go, as you said before, what do you want to be when you're older? And then you're pitting everyone against the best, competing it. Yeah. No kid wants to come last. Everyone comes first. Mm-hmm. And often in that place, you don't end up taking risks because you don't want to fail.
Yeah.
For me, like, what you're talking about is fundamental life skills.
Absolutely.
And if we were teaching them in school rather than, we're going to teach kids maths until they're 18 now, or other stuff, it just feels like,
what's the point?
Yeah.
Well, you see, this is one particular drum I've been banging for a long time in my career, trying to get schools to take that on board, and schools love it. But the education, the people that make the decisions about education can't be on the curriculum. No, you can't have that. It can be an extra. Schools can choose to have that as an extra, but then schools have to pay for it themselves. So schools can't do that because they can't afford to pay for things like that themselves. So that it goes by the wayside. So we'll continue to teach people long division and trigonometry till they're freaking 18. And my son's 14 at the moment, and he gets so frustrated. Why do I need to know that? Why do I need it? If unless I'm going to be an engineer, or what do I need that information for? There's so many amazing other subjects we can teach young people.
And the world's changing so fast now. You're teaching what kids are teaching you. You're teaching them for the Industrial Revolution to go out and just go into factories or wherever, and, as you say, following orders before. But the world's changing so fast. Look what the internet's done. Look what the technology's done. We don't even know if there's going to be jobs about in a couple of decades. Well, for one thing for sure, most of the ones which will be a significant amount will be automated.
Absolutely.
So so for me, that's done like fundamental life skills like this: how to deal with things emotionally, how to be a better individual, but then also skills like how to grow your own food, how to
absolutely
how to cook, how to nourish yourself. If we had them, then we wouldn't have for instance, what is it, half the country's like obese. And is that the people say to save the NHS? Well, that if we were to teach people how to grow their own food and plan it, well, that's going to bloody save the NHS.
It's a knock-on effect.
So it's just some things. It's like, and I think when you can take the zoomed out approach to stuff, you think, what's going on?
Yeah,
it's mad. It feels like it's madness.
Well, I think it is a form of madness. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, is literally the definition of insanity. And that's what if you go back, that's what we're doing. Is we're just churning out the same stuff. As I said, my son has been infuriated about maths since he was about 10. He's like, why do I need that? Why can't they teach me to pay my taxes? Why can't they teach me how to work out how much electricity I'm using? Why can't they teach me how to measure a carpet? That's maths. Yeah. But it's necessary maths.
It's a really good point.
It's and he's a kid. This is a kid. You're like thinking out of the mouths of babes. Listen to these young people, and I think that again takes us back to that question: what's the root cause of all these young people? These young people are smart, really, really smart, and they're being forced into a school that is just churning out the same stuff. They're bored, absolutely bored out of their minds, and frustrated, totally frustrated. But starting at the ground, basic life skills, teaching how to care for one another, teaching how to be kind to one another, teaching how to just be empathic and understanding. But unfortunately, the big boot at the top doesn't really want that, doesn't lend itself to that.
Doesn't fit into their plan.
Doesn't fit into the plan. Free thinking, smart generations doesn't fit into the big plan.
Healthy ones as well.
Healthy, smart people that could make change.
Yeah.
That doesn't fit into the plan. Robotic churned out people that will, be sick and kill one another. Just keep killing one another.
Yeah. Then
that fits into the grander plan.
Yeah. Thankfully, a lot of this stuff is coming to light. It feels like, particularly the last few years, I thought I was aware of stuff that was going on, and then all the past few years, I'm like, wow, even more levels and stuff. So I think naturally, as things come to light, that's when we can, they've been in the dark for so long, and all of a sudden the spotlight's on them. So in that time, we've got a choice, haven't we, individually and collectively, to make a choice of how we want to be ourselves and how we want to raise the next generation. And I think about my 2-year-old, and I'm kind of terrified of her going to school because I'm thinking, what's she gonna get? There's a part of me that I'm more in the camp, well, I'll homeschool, and Bruce like, no type thing. So we're kind of stuck in the finding a happy medium to that, or finding a school where it can feel like it's going to be focused on creativity and healing and life, rather than here you go. Because there's an amazing statistic. I do a lot of projects with young people, and supposedly between the ages of 0 to 3, something like 97% of kids are classed as creative geniuses.
Absolutely.
And then between 3 and 7, that dwindles down to a third of kids are considered to be creative genius. Then when you get into your 30s and 40s, only 3% are. Wow. So the thing is, we're all born geniuses.
Absolutely, we are.
The system, the conditioning, it drives it out of us.
Absolutely.
Because you go to school being told that, oh, you need to prove that you're good. We're already we just, there's no, I think you put about being like a square peg on your thing, is it square peg, round hole?
Square peg and a round hole,
And there's so many things like that, and isn't there a great quote from Einstein, is it, if you teach everyone...
If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its life thinking it's stupid.
Yeah, and we're all so unique. It's obviously, that's why I think about the school system, how can that possibly change? Because if you've got 30 kids getting pushed in each year, and they've got... You can't, one teacher and one classroom system cannot suddenly work out what each of those children at what level they're at and what direction they need to go in. So we'll see how things go, but maybe from my point of view, being a father now makes me want to be even more part of that change in some way, because it's literally the future, isn't it?
100%, yeah. It is. It's for those kids, and the hard thing is, isn't it? You think, okay, ideally, I wanted to get a camper van and take my kids around the world. That was my ideal, to travel the world and just educate them by their experiences, which is a big regret that I wasn't able to do that. But then you've also got to take into account helping our young people to socialise and helping our young people to fit into a society like this. If you shelter them too much from it, and then they go out into the big bad world, it becomes an even bigger, badder world, because they've not experienced, not built that resilience. Resilience is really, really important, and so sometimes experiencing terrible things is what's necessary to build that.
100%. Yeah. Gabor Mate would talk about getting the first 3 years of life are so important. What would you think that those... What is that in those first three years?
I mean, it's the conditioning. So the cognitive part of the brain isn't like kind of fully developed till you're about 5. So when children are those younger ages, they're predominantly kinesthetic, so they're absorbing things emotionally. And your emotional part of your brain is your more creative side of your brain, and so young people are. They're all just this kind of emotional sponge picking up on things, little Stella today, when I walked in, she emotionally picked up on the fact that, hang on a second, I've got to go out and Dad's got another woman in and Mum's not here. You could literally see that happening inside her body. She won't have understood that cognitively, but something felt different and something felt strange that she wanted to grab hold of Daddy. And it's that kind of emotional world for a young person. When babies are born, they stick their tongue out because they absorb knowledge and information through their tongue. That's the first part of their body. So little babies stick their tongues out all the time. And so I think that's got a lot to do with it, that absorption of the world as an emotional place. And then we start to become more cognitive around kind of towards the age of 5. And then that cognitive goes through the influence that you've got of other people, what other people are saying. And so we start to develop kind of blueprints and rules and life scripts, around that. If you're looking at Freud, that's around the time that are kind of, we go from being all id to kind of having a super ego and an ego, and they're the two, then you kind of your moral code and your reality code, so you're hearing things like, oh, I mustn't touch that because it's hot, or I mustn't do that because daddy's face frowns when I do it, or I mustn't do this. And we're starting to push sort of some of those moral ideas onto our young people, so people start thinking and start forming their opinions based on that. So, Gabor Maté is just amazing, and he says that no child has the same parent, which is exactly true. There was 4 of us, and we all had very different experiences with our parents, even though we could argue we were all brought up in the same household in the same way. But we weren't, because our parents were going through very different things at the time that each of us were born. We also had, like my sister didn't have anybody older than her. But I did. I had 2 people older than me. So you've got to look at those influences as well. And all of that happens on the inside of you. You start to develop things called a condition of worth. So I am only worthy if I smile. I'm only worthy if I don't cry. I'm only worthy if I don't have that tantrum in the middle of Sainsbury's. I'm only worthy if... And children will start to develop those cognitive rules for living, those thoughts based on what they're experiencing. So I think that's got a lot to do with it. A lot to do with how we then start to develop what our opinion is. And here's our own little individual opinion. So our parents might say something in exactly the same way to the 4 of us, but all 4 of us heard it differently. All 4 of us, it went through our own individual filter, and so therefore we all interpreted it differently. And that's, I think, what happens with all young people. It goes through our own individual filter, and then we start to process it and start to make it as thoughts or belief systems. And it's not until you kind of fast forward and start going into therapy that you begin to challenge those thought processes. I remember one of the things that was so powerful for me in therapy was I used to use the word stupid a lot when referring to myself. Like, my sister's wicked smart, really, really clever, really academic and studious. And so I was the only other girl. So in comparison, I compared myself to her. That I was stupid in comparison to her. It's 5 years between us. We used to play Scrabble, and I was not very good at spelling. But, I'm 5 years younger. And so she'd be like, oh, come on, you're so bloody stupid, go, hurry up and put a word down. And I would play it with her and my mum. So of course they were 2 smart women that were very competitive with one another as well. And I was just this younger one that was, I'm not as quick as figuring out words. So I always thought that I was stupid. And it wasn't until I was in therapy at 27 years of age when my therapist said, you use the word stupid when you're referring to yourself a lot. And he said, are you aware of that? And I was like, no, I wasn't really. And he said to me, did you pass your exams in school? I was like, yeah. Did you get many O-levels, they were called then? And I was like, yeah, I got 8. You must have revised a lot for that. No, not really. So how did you get 8 O-levels if you're stupid and you didn't revise? And I still remember that as this light bulb moment, thinking, I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. My intelligence is different from my sister's because she's a bookworm and she's very, very, very academic and studious. But I certainly wasn't stupid. But if you think about a phrase that you use to refer to yourself and how many times you say that, we're just conditioning ourselves to believe who we are. Doesn't mean that that's the truth. It's just it's a thought that we've had for a long time. It doesn't make it the truth. Yeah. If you imagine all the different thoughts that young people are getting and that the society is getting, and we just think it off. If you think a thought often enough, it becomes the truth. But it isn't. And it's only when you begin to realise that you can actually challenge that and stop and think, do I believe that? Do I think that way about myself? Or do I agree with that? And that's when you can begin to start to change things. But I think for young creative minds, that, you know, that's when we've got to put all that gorgeous stuff in. That's when you put all that gorgeous stuff in. And you being frightened about sending your little one off to school in case all of that gets obliterated. It won't.
Yeah.
She'll change. But that core stuff will always be there. She'll always be able to access it. You know, she might take different paths and lose herself a little bit along the years, but that core stuff is always going to be there. And that's what we try and reach in therapy, is reach that, the core stuff, you know, so you can start to pull out different thoughts about yourself.
I know for myself, you said 27 for therapy. For you, I was probably around about that age for myself. And I just remember, like, over a period of time, for me it took it's a life journey, isn't it? But it took a number of years of doing it, but just seeing the absolute benefit, and just to be able to sit with someone who will just literally hold that space for you for an hour, once a week or once a month, whatever it is, to have that space. If you can just, whether you just want to let off steam for what's going on what feels like the surface level, or if you want to get really deep in it for what's happened to you when you were a kid, or some other things that have happened, to have that space and someone can just, like you said, you have that one person that suddenly says to you, actually, no, well, you're not stupid, you've done all these things. You know, I've had those number of light bulb moments where just reframe stuff. It just got flipped from this, my conscious mind or subconscious mind just repeating the same thing over and over. Don't they say something like 90% of our thoughts each day are just based
95% of your thoughts are unconscious.
Yeah. Same stuff over and over and over.
So if that unconscious stuff is being conditioned to think in a certain way, that's what's influencing our behaviours. Do you know what I mean? That unconscious stuff, if it's been kind of really programmed to be quite negative, then even if you're going, right, today I'm going to really think positively, but the unconscious stuff, the other 95% has been conditioned to be quite negative, it'll be really, really hard. Yeah. So it's pulling that unconscious stuff and going, this is what I'm thinking back here as well. So I might be trying to think positive in this tiny part of my brain. But you've got to change all that back stuff. You've got to recognise where all that came from. A lot of the work that I do with clients is timeline work. So we go right back along that timeline of their life experience, but we look at it from the outside in. How might she have been feeling at that point? How might he have experienced that situation? And that separation of looking in at yourself, travelling along that journey, and the things that were happening and how that might have influenced the way that you think and feel is so powerful. So
this ties in very much to like inner child work then, and then
kind of, but it's more about just being able to take a voyeuristic perspective of your life so far, of your journey so far.
Giving you some distance from it as well.
Giving you a distance, a separation from it. You know, did you feel unhappy as a kid? No, I never felt unhappy as a kid. Okay, but when we look at it from the outside in, how do you imagine she might have felt at that point when, you know, I don't know, dad left or those kids were bullying her? Well, I think she probably would have felt sad. What did she do to prevent herself from feeling sad? Oh, she masked it. How did she mask it? Oh, she masked it by kind of being a bit rebellious, and she would be really naughty in class, so she'd get kicked out of the class and sent home. So this person now is playing up in school because the environment doesn't have those three conditions we talked about. People are being mean. I can't say that I'm sad about it, but if I get disruptive enough, they'll send me home and I won't have to put up with it. And that's not a conscious thought. Yeah. It's just how we develop our behaviours. But stepping out and looking in, it just gives that separation perspective. So you can begin to use the creative imagination that we talked about, that we all have between the age of 0 and 3, to imagine how that young person would have felt. And I use that word a lot. Let's imagine how that young person felt. And if you use that imagination, that 0 to 3 stuff can come out. So that's that deep unconscious stuff of, how did I really feel? How might I have really felt? And that's when you can start speaking to the background noise, you know.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, this life, isn't it? This journey that we go on,
Yeah.
you know, when you start to peel back and you actually realise how magical it is and how incredible it can be, and it's a beautiful journey, you know. I think I use the term like live and learn, and you know, we're all here to grow and to expand and to become more of ourselves. And I often like to think now of actually, when you can think about things that happen in your life, like often when you're going through something shit, you're like, you don't want to be anywhere near it. But as soon as, whether it's time or perspective, actually you go, that happened because of this, and it shifted me in a different direction, and I was able to deal with that thing that came up. So if we can come in that place of self-empowerment rather than sometimes, I think maybe when you start out you might play a bit more, this happened to me, I'm the victim of this. Well, actually, if we can reframe that from being, you know, okay, it happened to me, but okay, why did it happen to me? What can I turn that into? Who's it going to turn me into? What I'm growing? And then you can look at it all maybe and go, well, wow, you know, was it all for my greater good in some way?
Yeah.
Often, sometimes when you're in the thick of it, or you say that to some people, they might want to slap you because they're like thinking, what?
Really?
Yeah, they're in the thick of it. I think sometimes you don't say that to people at a certain time because they're in it, but I often think about that, certain things. So many things I look at, right, okay, but that happened. So a health challenge happened, I'd hated that. But look how much self-knowledge I got through transforming my health to be able to have all these tools and skills to feel like, wow. Yeah. But if that didn't happen to me 20 years ago, then I wouldn't have gone on that journey.
Absolutely.
I suppose it comes on that point of actually taking that journey, though, because if you don't take that journey to grow and to learn from it, then you will generally can just be stuck in it. Yeah. One thing we touched on earlier on is obviously, you know, I've seen my own life the power of, you know, therapy and counselling and stuff like that. But do you think there's a time when there's other things need to come in as well to go even deeper? Like Gabor Mate will take people on ayahuasca retreats. You know, you've got psilocybin and you've got MDMA and ketamine therapy and stuff. I know it's MAPS in America who are doing quite a lot of work with it, and I know there's particular states in America where it's actually legal now to do it. I don't know what it's like in this country, but you got any kind of insight or experience with those?
Yeah, I think if something is growing on the planet, it's there for a reason, isn't it? You know, and a lot of these you know, psychedelics, they grow naturally in the world, so they're there for a reason, aren't they? You know, not this look pretty. But the idea of it is that many years ago, back in the history of therapy, you know, psychedelics were used a lot. LSD was used. MDMA was actually used in couple therapies. So remove the sexual tension. So when couples have come, you know, getting to conflict, the sexual tension builds up because they stop having sex with one another, they stop being intimate with one another, they start kind of wanting to kiss and cuddle with one another, and then the tension builds even more. And there was one train of thought that if you remove that tension, then you can actually get to the root of what's really going on, what's really the problem. And so they were prescribed MDMA, go home, you know, the love drug, go and get intimate with one another, come back to therapy, and then deal with the problem, because you remove that tension that's in the body from not being intimate with one another. So yeah, I definitely think they've got a place. I really do think that psychedelics have definitely got a place, because they're designed to open up your mind, you know. And what we've been talking about this afternoon is how much of the powers that be and society and the system is working really, really hard to kind of suppress that mind, squash that mind into thinking in the way that, you know, works for the system. We use a tiny percentage of our brains. We've got so much ability in our brain that we don't even use. Self-awareness and therapy and stuff like that allows us to gain access to some parts of that brain that we've got, that amazing brain that we've got. But for some people, the need for a chemical and something to start that process. I definitely think there's space for it, 100%. 100%. It's like everything in moderation, though. Do you know what I mean? So we're not encouraging people to go out there and just be constantly high, but just microdosing and small amounts to just remove some of those tensions and pressures and defense mechanisms that we put in place, and and barriers that we put up there, and I talk with clients a lot about their upbringing, and so many people are kind of instantly protective of their families, and not wanting to sound like they're having I don't want to sound like I'm saying my parents are bad, because they weren't. So it removes some of those things that stop us from reaching what it is that we really think and feel. So I do think there's a massive space for them, absolutely.
And when do you think it might become, more, available? Like, because I've heard, like, is it whether it's in America or even in New York, like, go and doing like assisted MDMA therapy as a couple with a counsellor, and then taking on that journey in that space. Obviously, we know we can all get our hands on it on the streets and stuff like that, but to be able to do it in that place, I know ketamine therapy seems quite powerful in some places in America. I've seemed to see it from it has to come, it has to become more available.
Well, as I say, I think we've gone. It was always used before. That type of stuff was always used before. In this country, I'd be a little bit sceptical. I think in the States they're a little bit freer with stuff like that. The country is a little bit freer with stuff like that. Marijuana's legal in lots of states in America, not in others. Still not here. We're so backward in a lot of ways. You just you never see somebody stoned going out and causing trouble. But alcohol is legal.
Exactly. You can go get a couple of bottles of vodka, drink them, destroy yourself, get in the car, destroy other people's lives, and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's legal, but marijuana, no. And again, the conspiracy theorist in me that I've been accused of being that so many times, it makes me laugh. But I don't know. They don't really want people to be able to be legally influenced to think and to use that creative, that open part of your mind. Because there would be a revolution. It's easily to have a revolution on a small island like the UK than I suppose it is in the States. Yeah. So maybe that's behind some of the thought process. I would love to see it legalised. I would love to see that. I would love to be able to help people in that way. But whether it would in this country, I'm a bit sceptical as to whether it will or not.
It's just going to have to be underground, isn't it, for a while?
Yeah, of course.
And until
it's just a tool, it's another way of moving some of those obstacles out the way, and allowing people to connect.
I've heard some people talk about how they've gone and done like a 7-day ayahuasca retreat in Peru or whatever, and they said that was like 20-30 years of counselling for them, because it got so deep, it unearthed so much, had so much insight that they were literally a completely different person at the end of that week. So I'm not saying we should all go and do a week in Peru. It'd
be really nice though, Rob, wouldn't it?
It would be lovely. I think sometimes when people say that, because I heard that from people, I'm like, oh wow, it sounds amazing. Does that mean I don't have to do another 20 years of therapy? I can just go and do that. And I think everyone's got their own journey and their own time frame to go on stuff. But I think there's times where maybe at this time where we need more assistance to push things on. So, and like touching on alcohol and stuff before, it's absolutely bonkers how it's totally acceptable to get absolutely destroyed and wasted, and it's almost encouraged and championed. Yeah. And it's like, what? You know?
Yeah, and like I said, you will never see someone stoned causing mayhem.
No.
But people go out and get drunk all the time, and there's knife crimes and people fighting and carnage every single weekend in this city alone. But most of the stoners are inside watching funny movies and laughing and having really really bonkers wonderful conversations with one another. Yeah. With open minds.
Maybe you think we went to Glastonbury Festival the other year, and it's literally like an alternative reality for like a week, and everyone's so happy and caring and loving. Okay, the drugs are playing a part, but
the drugs are pulling out what you've got in your mind.
Absolutely, it's about environment, isn't it? Yeah. There's an environment. We talked about environment, how important it is. It has a huge impact on how we think and what we do in life. Yeah. You create that space, an opportunity for people. A loving environment, music, everything. It's
tapping into those parts of your mind that you want to be pulled out. you know, which is the love and acceptance. So we go back to those 3 conditions that we said, wouldn't that be amazing if we taught that in schools? Yeah, of course, because if you taught that from a very young age, there might not need to be a need for a week in Peru, you know, if we're taught that, because what you're then doing is you are opening those beautiful minds from a very, very young age and keeping them open to love and acceptance and kindness and warmth and what's the planet doing and what's the universe providing for me, and you know, what does the moon do, and what's the sun's purpose, as well as just, you know, kind of like keeping us warm. What else is that, you know, just keeping that open mind from a very young age would be amazing, but our system has closed so much of that down that I do think, you mentioned before about there feels like this pull towards change, and that things maybe do need to fall apart, and so maybe that's why there are more people being drawn towards these kind of retreats and these kind of options, just like they did in the 60s. Do you know what I mean? It was people were drawn to, after being really closed and conditioned and stifled, they were drawn towards being free. And as you know, as humans, I'd like to think that that's the way we are naturally. We're drawn to be being free and kind and loving and taking care of one another, and not, you know.
It definitely feels that is our true nature. It's, you know, it's human conditioning that has turned us the other way. You know, you put a little a 2-year-old white kid with a 2-year-old black kid, there's no racism, there's no nothing, there's you know, that's just been conditioned through the generations and stuff. Hate
is man-made. Hate is a condition. You know, the only time we were violent as indigenous human beings is when we just needed to eat. Violence was a necessity, that you would kill something to eat from. That would be it. It's like, or protect your tribe. Do you know what I mean? It's not going out of a weekend and, you know, smashing somebody's skull against a pavement. For what? He's not, you know, he's not stealing your wife or you know, it's just, or you know, invading your campsite. It's just the violence and the kind of the anger and the hatred is definitely instilled into us. It's not who we are naturally. No, and you know, I've used the term a bit, and it's just about us getting back to our roots, isn't it? And remembering our true nature, and trying to create an environment for that true nature to flourish. And it's going to take some time, because we've gone off course so much. And I think about courses, and also I had good analogies about train tracks. We've got an opportunity, like, which train do we want to get on now? Like, I've seen such crazy authoritarian measures the past few years. Like, in the past, I've only read about those things, but these have come so close. They've basically come into my front door, these measures, so much and stuff like that. And I'm like, that isn't the world that I want to live in. But often I think we need to see the world, what we don't want in life, before we can choose what we do want. Absolutely.
So now it's like, well, what train do we want to get on? Which is our destination we want to head towards? And then just take actions each day and each month or whatever that might just nudge us towards that. It's the power. It's choice, isn't it? And I think that's been a word that's come up subtly quite a lot today. Is knowing that we have a choice. You know, we do have a choice. It might not feel like that sometimes when life's pressure sits on top of you so fiercely, but we've all got a choice. You know, yourself, going back to yourself, your own choice. You know, you were young daughter, young baby at the time. You took a bit of you're on maternity leave. You had a choice. You know, and you know, through bloody damn. And I think a big part of it is, you know, it's hard work. It takes hard work, and I think in some ways a lot of young people now, sorry to say, that there's not that essence of like wanting to work hard to strive for something, can feel a little bit lost. And we got to get, you know, anything you want in life, it's not really just going to be handed to you. We've got to work on it. Of course, we can have a vision and we'll be guided and supported along the way. But as you said before, it's like it's us that makes that choice and those changes. So that seems like a pretty decent way to kind of wrap up, Lindsay. I think so. If anyone's listening to this and they want to find out more about yourself and they maybe wanted to have a session with you, or maybe a light bulb's gone off and thought, you know, I want to be a counsellor, how could they find out about Stand Tall? Or
well, the website's going live very soon.
It'll be live when this is out.
It'll be live when this is out. So yes, so through the website, and all of my contact details will be on that. So I'm sure you'll put that all together.
I'll put links in there as well. And have you got any thoughts about, do you have any events that might be coming up, or you might want to do, any plans for some retreats in the future?
Oh, definitely. Part of my movement towards change and evolving Stand Tall a little bit is to be moving towards much more of them. So yeah, we've got retreats that we're going to be putting together, one-off kind of one-day workshops as well, all geared towards just giving an opportunity for people to start that journey of understanding themselves a little bit better. And the idea is that they will eventually develop into full-blown retreats. Don't know whether we'll be dropping some acid in those retreats, but who knows?
I'll come. That sounds amazing.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much. There we go, everyone. Another podcast wrapped up. Really enjoyed that one. Love doing it face to face. It's a bit of a throwback for me to be able to, and perfect subject to be able to do it as well face to face with someone who's a therapist. I hope you found you enjoyable. Hope, as Lindsay says, what she's trying to do is to desire to help others find their true potential. And I'll be honest, I think that's very much what I try and do with this podcast, for us to become better versions of ourselves. And when we become better versions of ourselves, we're able to show up better for our family, our friends, and the world. And so yeah, if you enjoy this podcast, please share it with a friend. If you listen to an Apple podcast, please leave me a review. That would be amazing. And if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe and like and leave a comment and all that jazz. So anyway, until next time, have a good one.